almost done. I'm just saying, yeah, that's not the right behavior. That's clearly not what we're out to do. Even if you're in a sales role, right, where you want to be the number one salesperson, but you can make all your money and you don't have to push people down. Or I don't know. There's a lot of thinking around that. That's a good call. I need to unpack that one, but I like that. All right, last question in this subsegment. Shoot, we're already at an hour, which is insane. We're going to
Oh
wrap
my
up in a
goodness.
little bit. But if someone listening today wants to make their team more agile, what is the first thing you're going to tell them to stop doing, and what's the first thing you're going to tell them to start doing?
I would say stop focusing on utilization. So one of the traps I see all the time is, oh, we have these 5 specialists on the team and we want to make sure that we're utilizing each person to their maximum. So we're trying to find work for each person that will keep them fully busy in their area of specialty, because then they're fully utilized. But companies don't exist to utilize people, right? Companies exist to create value. And so instead, focus on delivering the most valuable stuff as quickly as possible. And it turns out that if you optimize for that, that's a different thing than optimizing for utilization. And so if you optimize for, throughput, optimize for delivering the valuable stuff as quickly as possible, that actually most of the people will be quote unquote underutilized. They'll actually have some slack time. And that turns out to be the highest performing state for the system as a whole. And if that sounds kind of intriguing, there's a theory around this. It's called the theory of constraints. The Wikipedia page for it's pretty good, at least it was last time I looked. And there's a book that's actually a really fun read. It's an easy read called The Goal by Elihu Goldratt. And it's a novel, but it's a business novel. And it kind of really walks through like, why is this the case? Right? Why is it that, optimizing for each individual person isn't going to actually give us the best overall result, right? We have to actually back up, optimize for the overall result, and then let each individual person find what's their best contribution to getting that overall result completed as quickly as possible. And it's hard because it's easier to manage for utilization and busyness
Yeah.
than it is to manage for throughput and actual delivery.
My first thought goes to, I know a lot of professional services teams, that's literally one of their metrics is on utilization, right? And because then I can bill based on you being out in the field, right? And it feels almost counterintuitive. But if you're saying that we can get more out of people, that is another huge thing that we need to unpack, where I don't have the time today, but I'm going to go to the wiki page and I'm going to do some digging there, because that is fascinating. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to solve for?
And your example is a perfect one. So professional services firms, right, that are billing, right, the force working at there is to optimize billable hours, right? Which is not the same thing as optimizing for getting the client's work done as quickly as possible, right? So if this firm comes in, right, maybe a staff augmentation firm, and they're doing some project or building some product for their client, right? What the client wants is, hey, we want our stuff, right? How soon can we have our stuff? But what the staffing firm wants is to keep everybody billable so we can bill as much as we can. And so those are different things to optimize for. And in that case, because the forces aren't aligned, the goals aren't aligned, probably the end result, right, getting the product out the door, getting the project done, isn't going to happen optimally because the goals aren't aligned and the forces aren't aligned.
So maybe you're changing to an outcome-based pricing strategy versus, that's a whole other thing to unpack, but right, you still need that revenue, right? So I'm not suggesting people in professional services, well, you should do less.
Yeah.
We're doing this to make some money. So maybe it's outcome-based pricing to offset that, but that's really interesting to unpack that one.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, we need to talk more about that one, because that's very interesting. All right, last segment before well, there's kind of a segment after that, but that's a 2-minute quick question, quick answer.
Right.
But the next segment is called the play. So let's talk about a role play situation, a scenario.
All right.
And I'm curious to how you would approach it. So a company just did a reorg. Now you have 3 layers of managers above the team.
Mm-hmm.
Morale's low, projects aren't shipping, and stand-ups, like we talked about, they feel performative. If you're brought in, which I imagine you've been brought into situations like this quite a bit. If you're brought in as the agile coach, what would you do in week 1, day 1 in week 1?
Yeah. So here are the things I would be looking for, right? So first I want to go in and try to be curious. I'm looking for patterns. One of the things that is a way that consultants and outside people can add a lot of value is, gosh, because we have been inside lots of companies, we've seen patterns. We've seen success patterns, we've seen failure patterns. And so we can kind of sniff these out, right, when we start to see the symptoms. So I'd be really curious, like, oh, what are the patterns at play here? One patterns that I would really be looking for, given the symptoms that you described, is a pattern that I call everybody's busy, but delivery is slow. And I've written a couple of articles about that. So, if you search on the Agile Learning Labs website for everyone is busy, you'll find the articles. If I boil it down, most of the time it comes down to we're trying to do too much. And by trying to do too much, nothing's getting done. And so part of that becomes making the work visible and then working with leaders on the discipline to stop trying to do everything, right? It's not about starting on all the important stuff. It's about finishing the most important stuff.
Yeah.
And so, stop starting, start finishing. And then the other thing I would look at, because you talked about morale being low, right? And sometimes that's just because we're working so hard, but nothing ever seems to get done. But also, very often morale is low when the people are not in touch with why we're doing what we're doing. And I see this with development teams. I see this sometimes with support teams where they just get these tickets and their job is to close the ticket, right?